Good morning. We're going to be talking about the cyclical approach to assessment and planning with professional development. I'm here today with a few presenters, and we're going to be talking about the layered approach that we're going to be using to train you on assessment and planning, as well as answering some questions that you may have about the processes and the integration of those. First of all, why do we need this professional development? And we need this professional development because the regions have requested that we work a little more on assessment and planning. Central office has noticed that we need to work a little more to build on our strengths and to work on our areas of improvement for assessment and planning. So we're doing a layered approach, and what that means is we're going to have 5 different components to this training. And the first one is the satellite, which we're doing today, and we'll be doing quarterly. And at the following our presentation, we're going to be taking call-in questions and email questions from you for our panelists. The next part will be an online course, and that will be a computer-based course that will include the information that will provide you with the knowledge that you will need in order to come into our learning lab to do your skills application. So with your online piece, you will also be given your case scenario for the first part of your learning lab as well. Then you will come into your learning lab where you will practice on a case scenario, and you will practice your assessment and planning with that case scenario. You will also have self-directed homework in a group assigned to you for the next component. And that component is our self-directed homework, where you will look at a regional case and you will apply some of the skills and the knowledge that you've received thus far to a regional case to show areas that are strengths and then also areas for improvement to move it towards best practice. You will also have a case presentation learning lab. Well, you'll have materials that you've prepared to move the case towards best practice. So that's the different components for this training. The next piece that we're going to do is I'm going to be asking our panelists some questions about exactly what this training is going to be about. So first off, we have Thomas Jones with us from the Office of Child Safety, and I want him to tell me a little bit about the technical assistance that he's been providing to the regions surrounding the assessment process.
Absolutely. It's been a different approach than we've taken in years past. I will request from the region about 2 weeks prior several cases for review, usually about half a dozen or 8 cases. I'll take all the information that's contained in the case recordings, in the assessments themselves, in the plans, and any other information that I can find regionally. I'll review the case in totality, and then when I go to the regions, I'll have the worker and the respective team leader for the case sit with me in front of a larger group and help me present the case to that group. It accomplishes a few different things. First, it allows us to go through case recordings, helps us understand the whole case, or the totality, the meat of the case, what's really going on. From there, we try to point out some of the parts where you can learn more about assessments. If they have a statement in there, such as, Timmy likes dogs, that's a good observation, but how can we actually take that and use it in an assessment format and assess that information to later use in a plan? So after we go through all of the case recordings, make our notes, then we turn to the audience or the participants in the room and and get them to help us write the functional assessment. We include in the functional assessment any information we can from other assessments, such as CANS, your SDM, and other private assessments. And once we understand the whole assessment and how that looks based on all the case information, we'll take those strengths and needs that we've identified through the assessment process and actually help write the plan based on that information. Thus far, it's been a very successful training, and I'm very glad that we're getting to now formalize it and partner with TCCW to bring it to all the regions.
Thank you, Thomas. Lisa, you've also been traveling to the regions. Explain exactly what you've been doing in the regions with permanency plans.
Sure. At the request of the regions, I have gone out to a few select regions, and the TA that I've been doing is really in 2 components. We would have kind of a more formal or information session where we would take assessments of a practice case and break down, look at those assessments, and then look at how those assessments should fold into planning. We would really focus on the information session about strengths and needs, the differences between outcomes and action steps, and how that thread should flow between assessments and planning and what that link is. The second component to that training was to actually select a regional case and have the folks who went through the information session look at the case and let them come up with kind of a presentation on how that case did when looking at those components. How are those cases assessments? What are the strengths of those assessments and areas for growth? How are the strengths and needs identified on the assessments and on the plan? And how are the outcomes and action steps identified on that plan? And what areas are they really well done? And what areas are there opportunities for improvement? So it was kind of an information session and then trying to apply it to an actual case to get a little practice in that. And that's primarily what we've been doing to improve those areas of practice.
Thank you, Lisa. And Ricky, we ask you to be here because there's lots of legal questions that come up when we talk about assessment and planning. So can you tell me a little bit about the benefits of having that information included on a plan, or also some of the issues that might come up if you have an assessed need on an assessment that's not included in a plan and that type of thing?
Sure. The assessment identifies both the strengths and the needs of a family. When we identify the strengths in a family, we can build on those strengths to address the needs of those families. When we do a plan with a family whose child is in custody, that plan addresses those needs and sets forth how we're going to work with that family in order to address those needs and reach the goal of the plan, which can be reunification with the family, custody with a relative. It can even be, in some instances, adoption or permanent guardianship. By using and assessing those strengths and needs on the front end, we can work those into the plan. The plan flows from the assessment, and we can show the courts that from the very inception of the case, we identified both the strengths and the needs of the family and began working with them. We are required as a department to do reasonable efforts to reunify, and that assessment, which if it comes early and is updated frequently because it is a living document, if that assessment is done and utilized, then it is very easy for us to show the courts that we worked not only regarding the needs of this family, but we built on their strengths as well.
Thank you, Ricky. So it sounds like the two workshops that we did in the regions really concentrated on either assessment or permanency plans, and we really didn't get in depth into how they both integrate together. So can you guys talk a little bit about the benefits of how these processes work in tandem?
Sure, not a problem. As Ricky alluded to earlier, if you look at the processes that are within the department, you'll see that assessments should lead to planning. I think these two trainings that myself and Lisa have done definitely had both components in there, but the focus tended to be one on assessment and one on plan. And if we as a department are saying you need to understand how your assessments flow to plans, it really only makes sense to train the two together. I think traditionally the department has done a fantastic job of training the components themselves, and I think in general, staff have gotten used to and adept at doing assessments and doing plans, but it's now time to realize the potential from those assessments and really build the information into the plan. So it was a very natural progression to combine these two trainings into one that would help staff understand the totality of the work they're doing from assessment to planning.